And my husband hit me secretly until one day I fainted in front of his boss, and he pretended I had fallen down the stairs, but he turned pale when Camilla's smile shone like a diamond in front of everyone. But behind that perfect curve, there was a secret so dark that if it came to light, it would destroy not only their marriage, but also the prestige that surrounded her. At 32, her clear skin and elegant demeanor earned her admiration from neighbors and high society women, a role model of refinement. Many believed she had it all: a successful husband, an impeccable home, designer clothes, and the dream life so many longed for. What no one knew was that every time that smile appeared, it did so like another layer of makeup, one that hid the marks that couldn't be seen with the naked eye. The afternoon was warm, with a golden light illuminating the gardens of the Los Alamos Residential Club. Camilla walked between the tables, greeting every familiar face with a kiss. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee and the French chef's desserts filled the air. Several women chatted about trips to Europe, private schools, and beauty treatments. "Camilla, my dear, always so impeccable," said Laura, a neighbor with soft hands and expensive perfume. "I heard Esteban closed a multi-million-dollar deal. You must be proud." Camilla held the coffee cup gently, keeping her hand from shaking. "Yes, he always gets what he wants done," she replied, not revealing that the night before, the same man had squeezed her wrist so tightly that there was still a purple mark under the sleeve of her blouse. "And you're always there for him. That's what a real wife does," added Teresa, another woman in the group, in a tone that sounded more judgmental than complimentary. Camilla smiled, but her stomach sank. A real wife, she thought. Her mother had repeated that phrase so many times that it had become embedded in her heart. She'd heard it even on her deathbed, as if it were an invisible inheritance she had to carry forever. "A marriage is sustained by love and patience, my daughter." Outside, in the parking lot, Esteban was talking on the phone, and he was wearing his tailored navy suit and had that haughty posture that made him seem untouchable. When he finished the call and saw Camilla, he leaned over and kissed her on the cheek, but his gaze held a cold glint. "Come on," he ordered, barely moving his lips. "Don't stay there talking so long." "I didn't come here to watch you drink coffee all day." Camilla apologized to the women and walked with him to the car. During the drive back, the silence became so dense it seemed to fill every corner of the vehicle. Esteban kept his eyes fixed on the road, but his tense jaw betrayed his irritation. "I didn't like the way you behaved," he said suddenly. "I saw you talking to Laura for too long. That woman is a viper, and I don't want my wife to be the center of her gossip." Camilla took a deep breath, trying to choose her words carefully. "We were just talking about trivial things." "Trivial to you," Esteban interrupted, "but to everyone else, every word you say speaks to me. Do you understand? Every gesture you make reflects who I am." When they arrived at the house, Esteban slammed the car door and got in first. Camilla followed him, a lump in her throat. As soon as she crossed the threshold, he turned to her, grabbing her arm. "Do you want them to start thinking you don't know how to behave?" he asked, squeezing so tightly she felt a burning sensation under her skin, and her lips fell before she could finish her sentence. "So don't make me look bad." He let go of her and walked toward his office as if nothing had happened. Camilla stood in the hallway for a few seconds, taking deep breaths to keep the tears from running. She went to her bedroom and closed the door. In front of the vanity mirror, she lifted her sleeve and looked at the bruise that was beginning to turn purple. She ran her fingertips over it and remembered her mother's face, fragile and tired, lying in a hospital bed. "Love and patience, daughter. That keeps a home alive," the voice of the woman she had loved so much whispered in her memory. Camilla stroked the edge of a framed portrait on her dresser. Her mother's face seemed to look at her with tenderness, and at the same time, with a strange demand. In the distance, the phone rang. She went downstairs to answer it. "Camilla." The voice was weak, almost muffled. "It's your father. I need to see you. There are things we need to talk about before I can't anymore. Dad, are you okay?" she asked with a start. "Not completely, but it's not just for my health. This is important. Come tomorrow." "Promise me you'll come," Camilla promised, feeling something unsettling settle in her chest. She hung up the phone and sat for a moment in silence, listening to the sounds of the house. Esteban's constant typing in his office, the distant hum of the refrigerator, the tapping of a branch against the window. She went back upstairs. She had to get ready for Esteban's company's anniversary party. She opened her closet and took out a simple yet elegant black silk dress. And in front of the mirror, she began applying foundation to the bruise on her arm. The color was disappearing beneath the layer of cosmetics, but she knew her skin was still burning. Her breathing became slow and controlled, as if with each stroke she was also trying to erase the fear. Esteban appeared in the doorway, watching her. "Remember to smile tonight," he said in that soft voice he used when he wanted to sound kind. "People love women who smile." Camilla glanced at him and nodded. She didn't say anything. When he left, she allowed herself to let out a long sigh, as if expelling all the strength she had left. The mirror reflected the image of a flawless woman, but the feeling inside her was like glass about to shatter. Camilla smoothed the fabric of her black dress with her hands, trying to ignore the slight tremor that betrayed her. The scent of the perfume she'd chosen mingled with the bitter taste rising in her stomach. And an hour later, as she put on her earrings, she heard Esteban's firm footsteps approaching down the hall. He entered without knocking, looking her over from head to toe as if evaluating a product before selling it. "Hey, perfect." "I like seeing you like this," he commented in a tone that was meant to sound like a compliment, but to Camilla it sounded like a judgment. She picked up her bag, took a deep breath, and followed him to the car. And the drive to the hotel where the company anniversary would be celebrated was a silence interrupted only by the GPS directions and the city lights reflecting off the windshield. Camilla tried to focus on something other than the emptiness in her stomach. And she had barely touched a sip of coffee that morning, and the pregnancy Esteban had yet to admit kept her feeling constantly weak. When she arrived, the hotel lobby was resplendent with crystal chandeliers and red carpets. The sound of clinking glasses and cheerful murmurs filled the air. Esteban took Camilla's arm and led her toward a group of executives chatting animatedly. There stood Ricardo, Esteban's boss, a man in his 60s with silver hair and eyes that seemed to see more than he let on. "Ricardo, how nice to meet you," Esteban said, shaking the man's hand with a rehearsed smile. Esteban responded, keeping an eye on Camilla. "And you must be the lovely wife he tells me so much about." Camilla smiled politely, although she noticed Ricardo's gaze linger for a moment on her arm, as if he'd seen something beyond the silk of her dress. The conversation turned to work-related topics. Ricardo asked precise questions, and Esteban answered in short sentences, dodging some questions with overly rehearsed confidence. Camilla sensed a sharp edge in Ricardo's words, as if each question sought to cut through the facade of perfection Esteban tried to maintain. Meanwhile, she felt her legs growing heavy. The music, the lights, the murmur of voices, everything seemed to blend into a thick cloud. Her breathing became shallower, and cold sweat began to run down her back. "Are you okay?" Ricardo whispered, noticing her pallor. Camilla opened her mouth to reply, but a dizziness enveloped her. Her knees buckled, and before she realized what was happening, the floor was approaching her. The murmur of the room became even more restless. Glasses clinked and several people approached. Esteban crouched down beside her, feigning concern. "She fell down the stairs," he said firmly, looking around. She was distracted and tripped. Ricardo frowned, watching Camilla as she was helped up. "I know it wasn't like that," he murmured, low enough for only Esteban to hear. Esteban's face tensed. "And don't start, Ricardo." "She's fine," he replied in a tone that tried to sound light, but his eyes held a warning gleam. Camilla was led to a secluded chair while a waitress brought water. Her throat felt dry and her hands cold, but the discomfort wasn't just physical. There was something about the way Ricardo watched her, a mixture of concern and certainty that made her feel like she was on the edge of an invisible precipice. And then, among the guests, Vanessa appeared. Camilla's cousin walked confidently, wearing a tight red dress that left little to the imagination. Her deep crimson lips curved into a smile when she saw Esteban. She leaned over to greet him with a kiss on the cheek that lasted longer than necessary. "What a surprise to see you here, as elegant as ever," Vanessa said, her voice laden with a tone that Camilla found unbearably familiar. "Vanna, I didn't know you were coming," Esteban replied, barely hiding his satisfaction. Ricardo watched the scene without looking away. Camilla felt a pang in her chest. The closeness between them wasn't that of two casual relatives. Vanessa turned to Camilla with a theatrical gesture of concern. "Cousin, you're pale. Do you want me to take you home?" "I'm fine," Camilla replied, swallowing. "I just need some air." Esteban intervened with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Don't be dramatic, Vanessa. Camilla will be fine." The party continued around them, but in that small circle, the tension was so evident that anyone who came close could feel it. Ricardo, standing next to Camilla, tilted his head slightly toward her. "Sometimes falls aren't accidents," he said, almost in a whisper. "And there's always someone who's seen more than they should." Camilla didn't know how to respond, and he looked at Ricardo, who held his glass calmly, but whose eyes held a hardness he hadn't shown before. Esteban, noticing the exchange, stepped forward. "Ricardo, may I have a moment with my wife?" he said, placing himself between them. Ricardo took a sip of his drink and stepped back, though his eyes remained fixed on Esteban. They weren't those of a man who believed the story he'd been told. As Esteban led her to a more secluded corner, Camilla felt the gazes following her, and she could hear the music blending with the murmurs and her heart pounding in her chest. Esteban leaned toward her, smiling as if telling her something sweet, but his voice was a whisper laced with menace. "Don't break down in public again. Do you understand me?" She nodded, feeling the temperature in the room drop several degrees. In the distance, Vanessa was talking to a group of people, but her eyes met Esteban's every few seconds, as if they were sharing an invisible code. Ricardo, on the other hand, hovered near the bar, observing every gesture, every glance, as if he were putting together a puzzle, and when Esteban and Camila walked past him to the main table, Ricardo, without smiling, spoke a few words that made the air feel heavier. "You can't always hide what's going on at home, Esteban. Sooner or later, everything comes to light." The icy stare he then cast at Esteban wasn't that of a curious boss, but rather that of someone who knew a truth he was willing to use. Camilla felt it like an invisible current that ran through the room and chilled the atmosphere. Esteban, though he maintained his hostly smile, slightly tightened his lips and looked away from Ricardo like someone dodging a knife. The music started up again, and the clinking of glasses filled the air, but Camilla knew something had broken at that moment. The party ended with apparent calm. Camilla got into the car next to Esteban without saying a word. The city passed by the window like a distant backdrop until they reached home. Esteban didn't speak. His silence weighed more than any shout. Camilla, exhausted, left her purse on the hall table and went upstairs to her bedroom. When she opened it to put her things away, something small fell to the floor. It was an envelope with no return address, and her name handwritten on it. She opened it, feeling a strange feeling that made her skin crawl. Inside was a folded sheet of paper with tightly pressed capital letters. "Don't trust your blood. They want to destroy you." Camilla read the sentence several times. The word blood stuck in her like a needle. And who could send her something like that? She thought of her sick father, of the few relatives with whom she had contact and communion. The image of her cousin at the party, in that red dress and her closeness to Esteban, mingled with the memory of old rivalries, and she kept the note in a secret drawer in her dressing table. She couldn't show it to Esteban. He would use it to accuse her of paranoia. The next morning, Camilla packed her bag to visit her father. Esteban had left early, but before leaving, he made it clear that he expected her to accompany him to an event that evening. At the hospital, the smell of disinfectant and the rhythmic sound of the machines greeted her like a slap of reality. Don Julián was thinner, his skin pale, and his hands cold. "Daughter," he said hoarsely, "I'm glad to see you." Camilla went over to hug him, but on the other side of the bed, sitting in a chair, was Vanessa. She was wearing a simple dress, but her eyes had that calculated gleam Camilla knew. "I've been coming often so he doesn't feel alone," Vanessa said in a sweet, rehearsed tone. "You're always so busy." "I have my responsibilities," Camilla replied without taking her eyes off her father. "What did the doctor tell you?" "I should rest, and it's just a matter of time," Don Julián replied, avoiding the two women's gaze. Vanessa smiled faintly, as if she knew something Camilla didn't. During the visit, she constantly interrupted, talking about expensive treatments and how she could take care of certain procedures. Every time Camilla tried to get a moment alone with her father, Vanessa found an excuse to stay. When she finally left the room, Camilla caught up with her in the hallway. "What are you playing at?" she asked quietly. "I'm not playing, cousin. I'm just looking after your father. Someone has to do it," Vanessa replied, tilting her head. "And since we're talking about looking after, you should look after your husband. There's a lot you don't know." "Explain yourself," Camilla demanded. "Maybe one day I will." "Or maybe not," Vanessa said before walking away, leaving the scent of expensive perfume and a sense of threat in the air. And on her way home, Camilla's phone vibrated in her purse. It was a text from Ricardo. "I need to see you alone. It's important, call me." Camilla felt a quickened heartbeat in her chest, and she didn't want to hide anything else from her father, but she also couldn't ignore Ricardo's veiled warning at the party. She locked herself in the bedroom and dialed the number, but before it could ring, Esteban burst in. "Who are you talking to?" he asked, his gaze fixed on the phone with no one. He was about to make a call. Esteban snatched the phone from her, checked the screen, and saw the message. Her expression changed immediately. "You don't have anything to discuss with Ricardo alone. Do you understand? And he wants to help," Camilla said, barely daring to face him. "And he wants to stick his nose in where he's not wanted. He won't contact you again," she declared, leaving the phone on the dresser before leaving and closing the door with a loud bang. Camilla sank down onto the bed. The anonymous note, Vanessa's attitude, Ricardo's interest, everything seemed intertwined. She barely slept that night, and when she finally did, it was only to dream of a dark hallway where familiar voices accused her from the shadows. And the next morning, as she was leaving the supermarket, a man approached her. He was wearing a cap and worn clothes, and his face had something painfully familiar about it. Camilla said in a small voice. She looked at him confused. "I know you. It's me, Javier." Camilla felt the air escape her. Her brother had disappeared 10 years ago after a family argument that was never resolved. He was thinner, with deep dark circles under his eyes and a feverish gleam in his eyes. "I thought you were dead," he whispered, unable to hold back his tears. "I was, in a way. I've been sick and I don't have much time left," Javier replied. "But before I go, I need to tell you something. It wasn't an accident. They've been trying to destroy you ever since." Camilla stood stock still, holding the bags with trembling hands, and in that instant, she knew that what she had believed about her past was about to crumble, and that the shadows surrounding her were older and deeper than she had ever imagined. Javier, his voice breaking and his eyes glassy, asked her to move away from the street. They walked slowly, as if each step weighed a decade. They took refuge in a small cafe with worn tables and the scent of freshly baked bread. Camilla, still in shock, watched him sip a mouthful of coffee with trembling hands. "I don't understand," she said, almost in a whisper. "What do you mean they've been trying to destroy me ever since?" Javier ran his hand over his face as if trying to erase memories. "It was all planned. The accident that almost killed you, the way Mom started to get sick afterward, none of it was a coincidence. I overheard conversations, men coming to the house, meetings they didn't want me to attend. At first I thought it was business, but then I realized they wanted to get you out of the way." Camilla's heart was beating so fast she could barely hear clearly. "Who is it?" "People in the family." "And not just them. There's more," Javier answered, lowering his voice. "Esteban isn't with Vanessa just on a whim. They're planning something big." Camilla felt a chill. "It has to do with Dad." Javier nodded. "And he's the key, and his inheritance is what everyone wants." Hours later, Camilla visited her father in the hospital. Old Julian was awake, but his gaze seemed lost. When he saw her, he took her hand with unexpected strength. "Camilla, I have to tell you something before it's too late. Your mother and I never wanted you to live in empty luxuries, but your grandfather left property and land in my name. They're worth much more than you imagine. I didn't touch them because I wanted your life to be simple, far from ambition, but now I'm afraid someone might want to take them from you." Camilla felt the air thicken. "Who?" "Dad. I don't know for sure, although I have suspicions. And if they succeed, you won't just lose the money, you'll lose your name." That night, while Esteban ate dinner in front of her, Camilla didn't eat a bite, and she watched her husband's every move with a mixture of anger and fear. He spoke on the phone, using a low tone but with a firmness that betrayed he was closing some kind of deal. When he finished, he placed his phone on the table and smiled with a familiar coldness. "Do you look worried? Is it because of your father?" he asked with a hint of irony. Camilla tried to meet his gaze. "Have you spoken to Vanessa lately?" Esteban raised an eyebrow. "Of course. Why wouldn't he? She's family and has good business ideas." Camilla knew she wouldn't get any more answers, and she decided not to provoke him, but an alarm bell rang inside her. Confirmation came through an unexpected source. 2 days later, Ricardo intercepted her at the hospital entrance. He was wearing a gray suit and dark glasses that failed to hide the urgency in his voice. "I need you to listen to me, even if it's just for 5 minutes, Esteban said. "He doesn't want me to talk to you," she replied, looking around as if afraid of being watched. "That's precisely why they're falsifying documents, properties, accounts. Everything in your name is at risk. There's a judge signing everything, and it's not just any judge. It's someone with enough power to cover any tracks." Camilla felt a lurch in her stomach. "How do you know?" "Because I worked with that judge years ago, and I know how Esteban operates. I warned you at the party, and I'm warning you now. If you don't do something, in a few months you'll have nothing. No inheritance, no house, not even your last name cleared." Before he could answer, a black car pulled up next to them. Ricardo paled when he recognized him. A man rolled down his window and said something in a low voice that Camilla couldn't hear. Ricardo took a tense step back and then turned to her. "Don't call me. Don't look for me. If I keep talking, I could end up dead." He drove off, leaving her alone with a feeling of cold that didn't come from the wind. The next day, Javier appeared at her door. He was pale and sweaty. "Vanessa came to see me," she said without saying hello. "She offered me money to keep quiet. She says if I get involved in this, I won't live to see the end." "What did you tell her?" Camilla asked, feeling short of breath. "She could go to hell, but Camilla, I think she's serious." That night, Camilla couldn't sleep. The pieces fell into place. Vanessa visiting her father, Esteban discussing family business, forged documents, a corrupt judge, and now direct threats to her brother. At dawn, she decided to take a walk to clear her mind. She had her hands in her pockets and her gaze fixed on the ground when the roar of an engine jolted her, and she raised her head and saw a car speeding straight toward her. Instinct made her dive to the side, falling to the asphalt and scraping her hands. The vehicle brushed past her without stopping and turned the corner, disappearing from sight. Camilla lay on the ground, breathing heavily. She didn't need any more signs. Someone wanted her gone, and they were determined to do it as quickly as possible. The cold of the asphalt seeped into the fabric of her dress, but what shook her most was the certainty that the vehicle hadn't passed by chance. With her hands bleeding from the scrapes, she slowly sat up and looked around. No traffic had stopped. On that street, the silence was so profound it seemed to protect anyone who tried to kill her. She staggered to her feet and began walking toward the main avenue. A makeshift flower stand with a wooden cart stood on the corner. An elderly woman with white hair tied back in a messy bun and a flowered apron was arranging bouquets of red roses. Her dark, small, sharp eyes rested on Camilla. "You're trembling, honey."
Sit down for a moment,"
the woman said, offering her a folding chair. Camilla hesitated, but something in the florist's voice conveyed a strange authority. She sat down. The woman handed her a bottle of water and watched her silently, as if evaluating her every gesture. "I'm not naive," she continued. "I know when someone is running away from something or someone." "I'm not running away," Camilla replied, trying to sound firm, although her voice betrayed the inner tremor. The woman smiled with a mixture of tenderness and harshness. "My name is Rosa, but years ago they called me by another name in newspaper offices. Before selling flowers, I wrote stories like yours and others that ended very badly." Camilla looked up. Stories like mine, women who believed they could change a violent man. Some ended up in the morgue, and in every case the killer walked free. Sometimes because he had power, other times because he knew who to negotiate with. Camilla's heart raced. "Why are you telling me this?" Rosa lowered her voice. "Because I've seen your husband. I've seen him argue with a judge in that corner cafe with the same expression as men who know they'll never pay for what they do. And because a few days ago I saw a woman who looked just like you getting into your car, but it wasn't you." Camilla felt a lump in her throat. "Vanessa, I don't know that name, but I do know that what you're up to isn't small." Rosa bent down, opened a wooden box she had under her cart, and took out an oversized one. "I've been saving this. Photographs, copies of documents, and a couple of recordings. Your husband is more dangerous than you imagine." Camilla took the envelope with trembling hands, put it in her purse, and thanked him, not knowing exactly what to say. Hours later, at her house, she received a visit from Javier. His face was drawn and he was breathing heavily. Without saying hello, he pulled out an envelope similar to the pink one and placed it on the table. "I got this from a contact who still owes me favors. It's evidence that Esteban and Vanessa are transferring property through a corrupt judge. If this gets out, they could be caught, but you have to be careful. If they know you have it, they won't hesitate to finish you off." Camilla felt the room shrink. Javier looked at her with a mixture of urgency and sadness. "I don't have much to lose anymore, but you do." Before she could respond, the front door swung open. Esteban walked in, his face flushed and his eyes like knives. "What is this?" she said, lifting the envelope Javier had left open on the table. "And it's not what it seems," Camilla tried to say, but he interrupted her with a bang on the table that rattled the glasses. "Are you hiding things from me?" she shouted, then lowered her voice to an icy tone. "If you continue down this path, you'll not only lose everything you have, you'll lose the child you're carrying." Camilla felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. The pregnancy was a secret she hadn't shared with anyone. "How? How do you know?" she murmured. "I know everything, Camilla. And if you want that child to be born, you'll learn to keep your mouth shut." She turned and left, leaving behind a silence filled with threat. Javier clenched his fists, but said nothing. That night, unable to sleep, Camilla received a message from an unknown number. "Tomorrow at 11 a.m. in front of the Imperial Hotel. Don't bring anyone. R." The next day she met up with Ricardo. He was thinner, his gaze tense but determined. I told you not to look for me, but I can't let this continue like this. I have a plan to expose it publicly, but it will be dangerous. I need you to be ready for anything." "What do you want me to do?" she asked without hesitation. "I want you to record what he says, to have it in his voice so he can't deny it, and I'll make sure the press sees it." Camilla nodded, feeling a mixture of fear and determination. That same night, when she was already in her room, her phone rang. She answered without looking at the number. A distorted voice spoke on the other end. "If you don't stop, you'll all die." The phone cut out. Camilla stood in the darkness holding the phone, feeling like the war she'd been trying to prevent had officially begun. There was no breath that calmed her, no corner of the house that felt safe. She walked to the window and pulled back the curtain. Outside, the street seemed asleep, but she knew there could be eyes watching her around any corner. She closed the phone and left it on the table, aware that every word she said could be heard. The hours passed in oppressive silence. At dawn, Esteban entered the room without knocking, an envelope in his hand. He placed it on the bed and stared at her. "Congratulations, Camila. You're going to be a mother," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "And that's why I'm going to take care of you in my own way." She swallowed. "I don't need you to take care of me." "Oh, of course I do," he interrupted, sitting down next to her. "I've arranged for you to spend the next few months in a private clinic. Trusted staff, discreet doctors. No stress, no unwanted visitors, no opportunities for you to poke your nose where you don't belong." Camilla felt a cold emptiness in her stomach. "That's confinement, not care." "Call it what you want," he replied, standing up. "They'll come for you this afternoon." Esteban's plan was, of course, to isolate her, control her, cut off all access to tests or contacts. She knew that if she entered that clinic, she wouldn't leave until he decided to. That same morning, she received an unexpected message from Vanessa. "We need to talk alone. It's about Esteban." Camilla hesitated, but curiosity and desperation led her to agree. They met in a discreet restaurant in an area where no one would recognize them. Vanessa wore dark glasses and a sober dress, nothing like the provocative image at the party. "I want him to fall," Vanessa said bluntly. "He promised me things he didn't keep. He used me for his business deals to get me closer to your father. Now he's going to leave me out as if I didn't know anything." Camilla watched her silently, waiting for her to continue. "I have information, accounts, transactions, names, but I don't work for free," Vanessa continued. "I want a share of the inheritance when this is all over. I'm not going to negotiate with someone who's been stealing from my family," Camilla replied in an icy tone. Vanessa smiled disdainfully. "And if you don't accept, everything stays with me or with him. It's your choice." Camilla left without responding, but the encounter made it clear to her that the enemy was not only outside, but also in her own blood. A few hours later, she received a call from the hospital. Javier had been rushed to the hospital. She rushed there and found him in an isolated room, his face pale and his lips dry. He could barely speak, but when he saw her, he made an effort to sit up. "There's an envelope for you in the nightstand drawer," Camilla whispered, and she took it and put it in her bag. Javier looked at her intensely. "This is what you need. Don't let it go. Don't trust it." His voice trailed off. The monitoring machine beeped constantly, and the doctors rushed in. Camilla sat still, unable to move, watching as the team tried to revive him. They were unsuccessful. Javier had died. Alone in the hallway, she opened the envelope. Inside were copies of forged contracts, photos of Esteban's clandestine meetings with politicians and businessmen, and a list of properties transferred to third-party names. And it was the ultimate proof, and now she knew her brother had died so she could have it. That same night, Ricardo called her. "We have to do it now. I've arranged a meeting at the Imperial Hotel. His associates and some journalists I can trust will be there. If you bring that evidence, he won't be able to escape." "What if he tries to arrest me?" she asked. "It'll be a matter of arriving before he knows we're going to expose it. Be prepared to take risks." Camilla spent the night awake, reviewing the contents of the envelope over and over again, memorizing every detail in case she lost it. The next morning, she dressed in a simple dark suit, carrying a bag just large enough to hide the documents. Before leaving, she received one last anonymous message. "And if you cross that door, you won't return home." She didn't reply. She walked to the hotel, her pulse racing. In front of the entrance, she saw the glass doors open and close, reflecting her determined face. She pushed open the door and entered, knowing it could be the last time she breathed freely. The lobby's air conditioning contrasted with the humid heat outside, but it offered no relief. Each step toward the conference room seemed to push her toward a place of no return. The echo of her heels resonated between the marble columns as she approached the reception desk. Ricardo was there in a dark suit, holding a folder. "You're just in time," he said without smiling. "Everything's ready. When I give you the signal, take out the material and project it. Don't speak beforehand, don't argue, don't respond to provocations." Camilla nodded. She held her bag pressed against her body like a shield. Together, they walked toward the main hall. As the doors opened, a murmur died away. Esteban's associates, a few journalists, investors, and political figures, were occupying the tables. And at the head of the table, Esteban was chatting with a group of men. When he saw her, his lips curved into an icy smile. "Darling, I didn't know you were coming," he said, raising his voice enough for everyone to hear. "You're coming to support me as always." Camilla remained calm. Ricardo stood near the projector, while a technician he had hired checked the connection. Esteban confidently resumed his conversation. It was at that moment that Ricardo gave the signal, a slight nod toward her. Camilla stood up, took out the envelope with the documents, and placed it on the table next to the projector. Photos of private meetings, copies of illegal transfers, and recordings of Esteban and Vanessa discussing getting Camilla out of the way and speeding up the process before the old man dies began to appear on the screen. And the silence was absolute, broken only by a journalist who began recording on his phone. Esteban stood up furiously. "This is a setup," he shouted. "Everyone knows my wife is unstable." Ricardo stepped forward. "These documents have been verified, and there are witnesses." At that moment, the doors opened and 2 police officers entered. Camilla felt a chill. She didn't know if they were coming to arrest him or help him. One of them approached Esteban and spoke to him in a low voice, and he smiled, believing they were protecting him. But Doña Rosa, dressed in her apron and holding a bouquet of flowers, stepped forward from the back of the room. "I heard everything," she said clearly. "I recorded conversations, saw the transfers, and handed them over to the prosecutor's office." "You're not going to leave here." The officers exchanged glances. The second officer nodded and, to Esteban's astonished gaze, placed the handcuffs on him. A murmur ran through the room. Vanessa, who was watching in the back with a glass of wine, tried to leave, but another pair of officers blocked her way and arrested her. "And this doesn't end here, Camilla," Esteban spat as he was led out of the room. "You have no idea what you unleashed." The press began to surround her. Camera lights, microphones, questions piling up. In the midst of the chaos, a sharp pain shot through her from her belly to her back. Ricardo caught her before she fell. "Call an ambulance," he ordered as he helped her sit up. Hours later, in a different hospital than the one Esteban was overseeing, Camilla gave birth to a healthy baby boy. Between exhaustion and emotion, she held him to her chest, feeling real peace for the first time in months. Ricardo entered with a discreet smile. "It's all in the media. They won't be able to get out of prison anytime soon." Camilla nodded, too exhausted to respond. She closed her eyes, clinging to her son, and thought of Javier. Days later, with the baby asleep at home, Camilla visited the cemetery. And she was holding a white flower that Doña Rosa had personally given her. She stopped in front of her brother's tombstone and placed the flower on the stone. "Silence is the weapon of cowards. Truth is the weapon of those who survive," he said softly. The wind blew through the ypresses as if her brother were responding from somewhere. Camilla stood there for a few minutes, staring at the gray sky, until she felt the weight on her shoulders begin to dissipate. When she returned home, she turned on the camera a journalist had lent her to record a public address. She took a deep breath and spoke, looking directly into the lens. She told her story without omitting the pain, without softening the blows or the threats. And she didn't do this to expose her suffering, but to warn other women that violence disguises itself as love, that danger can sleep in the next bed, and that silence, even when it seems safe, is always complicit. When he finished, he turned off the camera and lay down next to his son. And the future remained uncertain, but he was no longer afraid to face it. He had learned that, even if the truth was costly, the price of silence was always higher. Dawn filtered through the curtains, bathing the room in a warm hue. Camilla opened her eyes slowly. Beside her, her son slept peacefully, like someone who knows nothing of the evils of the world. The echoes of the past few days still haunted her mind. The meeting at the hotel, Esteban and Vanessa's fall, the cameras, the questions, the sudden birth. Life had changed irreversibly, but inside her, a feeling remained that was difficult to quell. This wasn't over. As she sat up, the doorbell rang. She left the baby in the crib and went downstairs. When she opened the door, she found Doña Rosa. She was wearing simple clothes and holding an envelope. "This arrived at my flower stand addressed to you with no return address," she said, handing him the envelope. "I thought you'd prefer not to leave it in your gut." Camilla took it, noticing that the paper was slightly damp, as if it had been exposed to rain. And she opened it carefully and found a single sheet of handwritten paper. "What you destroyed was only a branch. The roots are still alive and are watching you." She felt a chill. Doña Rosa frowned as she read it. "Don't let this paralyze you. They want you to be afraid again." "This isn't just fear," Camilla replied. "It's a warning." Doña Rosa looked her in the eyes with that mixture of compassion and harshness that characterized her. If the roots are still alive, they must be pulled out. Camilla knew the woman was right, but pulling out roots meant entering once again into a terrain full of traps. She thanked her for the gesture and closed the door, putting the letter away along with the other evidence she had accumulated. Later, Ricardo showed up unannounced. He looked exhausted, as if he'd had several sleepless nights. "Some strange movements have started," he said, sitting down on the couch. "The judge working with Esteban hasn't been arrested, and one of his associates, a man named Arnaldo Vivas, is pushing to have the case dropped." "Why don't they arrest him?" Camilla asked. Because he has political protection, and because he knows things about very powerful people. Esteban and Vanessa were visible targets, easy to sacrifice. But this man is the root of the matter. Camilla felt the pressure in her chest. If he's still free, he's going to try to get everything back. And worse, Ricardo added, he's going to seek revenge. That night, while the baby slept, Camilla sat at the table sorting through papers. She found something she had overlooked. Among the documents Javier had left her, there was an old photograph. In it, her father, much younger, appeared, shaking the hand of a man wearing a distinctive ring. On the back, in Javier's handwriting, was written, "The man with the ring is the root." The next day, he decided to visit his father in the hospital. Although his health was still fragile, the sparkle in his eyes hadn't completely faded. "Dad, who is this man?" he asked, showing him the photo. Don Julián studied it in silence. His hand trembled before taking the picture. "That's Arnaldo Vivas, and you shouldn't have that photo. I need to know the truth. The truth is, your grandfather did business with him. Dirty business. When he died, I inherited not only his property, but also his enemies. Arnaldo always wanted to control what belonged to us. When you appeared, with your strong character and determination, he decided you were an obstacle." Camilla looked at him with a mixture of disbelief and pain. "And Esteban. Esteban was the perfect match to get close to. He was never with you out of love." Her father's words pierced her soul. She left the hospital feeling like the world was closing in around her. That afternoon, when she returned home, she found the back door ajar. Her heart leapt, and she entered cautiously and noticed that the drawer where she kept the evidence was open. Nothing remained inside. A sound made her turn. On the dining room table lay a bouquet of red roses. Among the petals was a small note. "Don't seek what you cannot destroy." She called Ricardo, but he didn't answer. She dialed Doña Rosa's number, and she answered immediately. "I'm on my way," the woman said decisively. "Don't be left alone." That night, while Rosa stayed in the living room watching, Camilla tried to calm the baby. The landline rang. When she answered, a male voice spoke calmly. "Now you know who's in charge. We don't want your money. We want your silence." "I'm not going to keep quiet," he replied with a trembling he couldn't hide. "Then the child will grow up without a mother." The line cut off. Doña Rosa, who had overheard the conversation, took his hand. This confirmed that they hadn't left and that they were going further. 2 days passed in constant tension until Ricardo finally appeared. He had a bandage on his arm. "They tried to run me off the road." "They didn't succeed," she said, placing a USB drive on the table. "This is all I was able to salvage before they took your evidence. It has a copy of the files, names, dates, and a video." Camilla plugged it into the computer. On the screen, Esteban appeared, handcuffed, talking to a man off camera. And the caller's voice matched the one who had called her earlier. "And don't worry, everything will be fine. The roots always remain," the voice said. That video was enough to prove that Esteban remained connected to the corruption network even from prison. "We can leak it," Ricardo suggested. "But you should know that once we do, there's no turning back." Camilla looked at her son sleeping in his crib. He knew that exposing it would mean turning on the threat machine again, perhaps worse than before. "Do it," he said firmly. The leak was made that same night. And by dawn, the video was circulating on every news channel and social media platform. Public pressure forced authorities to launch a formal investigation against Arnaldo Vivas. The city was filled with rumors, and for the first time in decades, the man with the ring was forced into hiding. Days later, Camilla returned to the cemetery. Doña Rosa accompanied her, carrying another white flower. "Do you think this will ever end?" Camilla asked, placing the flower on Javier's grave. "Not always," Rosa replied. "Sometimes we only learn to live with our roots, but that doesn't mean letting them grow." Camilla remained silent, feeling the weight and truth of those words. The wind blew through the eye presses again, and for a moment she thought she heard her brother's voice telling her to move on. And as she left the cemetery, she took her son in her arms and hugged him tightly. She knew the danger was still latent, but also that she was no longer the same woman who smiled to hide the blows. Now she had weapons, allies, and a determination that not even fear could break. That night, in front of the camera she had used before, she recorded a new message. She didn't speak of revenge or victory, but of resistance. The roots of silence are hidden everywhere. They grow in families, in businesses, in the streets, and only disappear when someone dares to uproot them, even if it hurts. Don't let fear fuel them. He turned off the camera and, for the first time in a long time, felt that his voice had not only been heard, but was beginning to resonate. What did you think of this story? Many people are experiencing similar situations. We hope Camilla's voice lives on in your hearts too. If this story touched you, share it. Be part of the change. Tell us in the comments what you would have done in a similar situation. Where are you watching from? We'd love to hear from you. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends and family. Every gesture you make inspires us to continue creating profound and real stories every day. And don't leave yet, our next powerful story is about to appear on your screen. And you can click on the links you see right now. They're part of an exclusive selection of captivating stories, created especially for you. Thank you for joining us.